It is the Pod Sham Pod, and we are back for an off-season episode. We are through the bulk of the free agency and player transaction period, which has been extremely active in the NBA, but kind of walking away from it and wondering what has actually really changed as far as, contenders going for next year, who's really improved themselves versus how many teams are just kind of shuffling around the deck chairs. But joined as always by my co-host, Drew Semler. Drew, how you doing?
It was exactly 16 years ago today that LeBron announced the decision.
I saw that.
I was going to bake it into my notes, and then I Googled it, and the Google date, July 8th, 2010. So it's hard to say the bulk of the player movement is behind us when we still don't know when the best player ever is going to choose his team.
True.
And pretty crazy that he could be choosing from the exact same group he did 16 years ago. Miami, Cleveland, the Knicks. Golden State wasn't on his radar back then. I don't know why I haven't seen the Knicks in any mainstream chatter. It makes sense, but I guess they just won. So he saw what happened to KD when KD did that, joining a much better team. Before we get into this stuff, though, I'm not doing well because Max, who has the funds to attend my destination 30th birthday, bailed on me and blamed it on his girlfriend's visa issues. And so since Max is a child of divorce, I have the ability to manipulate him with silence, with frustration. At the end of the day, we're gonna get through this. But until then, I'll just be a Grizzlies podcaster joining the $2 show periodically to see other people, essentially. But Max, let's get into the NBA stuff.
Yeah. Just to give the listeners a little behind the curtain view. It's been a little quiet in the group chats. I've been firing off a lot of messages, trying to get responses. It's a lot of blue and not a lot of gray in these group chats, which I know is intentional. And I can lie and say it's not affecting me, but Drew knows how to push my buttons. And
yes.
let's just say, Drew, I will make it up with an offer next summer. So
yeah,
we'll get through it.
Undisclosed locations.
Yeah. But yeah, it's regretful for sure. And I will be feeling FOMO.
Where should we start? Max wanted to rank the biggest title odds swinging moves we've seen so far. I have a bunch of notes just on the splashy ones, but I haven't ranked them in order of magnitude. So give me your list starting at the bottom or the top, and I'll have thoughts as I tend to do.
We'll start at the top. So obviously a lot of splashy moves. Giannis got traded to Miami. Jaylen Brown went from Boston to the team that beat Boston in the first round of the playoffs. LaMelo Ball got traded. The Lakers did a ton of stuff that may or may not lead to any more wins than they had last year. But if you're telling me which one team improved their title odds the most from what they did this summer, to me, it's Toronto with trading for Kawhi Leonard. Remains to be seen what, if anything, happens with the Pablo Torre-led investigation into the Clippers cap circumvention. But Kawhi Leonard was a top 5 player last year when he was healthy and when he played. I'd say it was the top 4 international guys and then him. And now I think with him on the team, and granted, he does not have a great track record of making it through more than one round of the playoffs in the last several years. But with him on the team, I now think they can win any series in the East, can win any series in the East. Not necessarily will, but I think they can match up with anyone. They're going to be insane defensively, and he gives them kind of a closer a la, the Knicks with Jalen Brunson, where they can get into these end of game situations, and it's not Scotty Barnes and Brandon Ingram and RJ Barrett trying to create offense. It's Kawhi Leonard, who at his peak is probably one of the 20 or 30 greatest players of all time. And They're a solid depth team. They're switchable. That front line of Kawhi, Scotty Barnes, and Colin Murray-Boyles, who had a little bit of a coming out party these playoffs, is going to be just like hellacious defensively. And just from a Knicks perspective, I think they can give them a lot of trouble as the reigning conference champions. So as an Eastern Conference fan, looking at all the teams who've made huge moves between Miami, Philly, Boston, and Toronto's the one that I look at and they give me some concerns with what the peak version of that team looks like.
Yeah, I actually see on BetMGM, they went from plus 12,500 to plus 2,200 to win the title overnight. So that's like a 0.8% chance of winning the title to a 4.3% chance of winning the title. Pretty massive. That's what you make trades like this for. Kawhi comes to his home away from home, returns for Brandon Ingram, Grady Dick, unprotected 31 and 33 firsts, 27 swap, and then a couple second round picks that we shouldn't get too excited about. Kawhi averaged 28, 6.5, and 4, and 2 steals on 51% shooting this past year. He played 65 games. He was elite. He was elite as usual, but more importantly, he was like finally available. The Raptors add a centerpiece, and we've talked about the Raptors as like a really fun group of elite role players who've just sort of like my Blazers been missing the guy to put into the middle of it all. Emmanuel Quickley is a good guard who can play some point guard, but you just don't want the ball in his hands too much in the biggest games. And he's kind of the perfect non-star guard to have, doing part-time ball handling duties next to Kawhi Leonard, who will have the ball in his hands when it really matters. And I agree with you. The CMB, Scotty Barnes, Kawhi defensive minutes are going to be insanely fun. They also just drafted Alan Graves, who's really fun on defense and is also positionally massive, like destroyer of actions on defense. This team is going to have a really, really good like top 7. And if we can get another magical, healthy Kawhi year, they have to be in the mix, especially with the way that the Boston return has been upended by locker room despair.
Yeah. And I just think like they're super flexible in terms of teams they can match up against. They've got defenders to throw against all the best players in the East between the Knicks, Giannis, Tatum, Philly now. Like they just have different bodies they can throw. They have Shed to throw at small guards. They have, Quickly's a good defender, a lot of switchable bigger bodies. And they're a fairly deep team, like 8 or 9 deep, depending on how Graves look as a rookie and how some of their other recent draft picks develop. Jacoby Walter, Grady Dick, who have been like varying levels of okay so far, but not really popping. But yeah, I just, they impressed me in these playoffs. I thought that Cleveland, and maybe it's an indictment on Cleveland, but I thought that Cleveland would win that series pretty easily against Toronto. And I thought that they'd be kind of the easiest out of all the teams in the first round. And they took that Cleveland team to 7 in a really competitive series. So I worry a little bit if they have enough shooting. I think that's probably going to be, especially once they get into the playoffs, their games are really going to need to be dragged into the mud, and they're going to need to win in sort of the 100 to 93 sort of range. But especially the way Pirtle protects the rim and does great center stuff. Like I'm already ready to hear an argument that this is the best front court in the league defensively, and they have a defense first coach in Darko. Like, yeah, they're going to be destroyers. Will it be fluid enough on offense? Maybe not. That will be the question. Like, are they just going to be Rockets East, inserting Kawhi into that mix? KD into the mix. Kawhi, obviously, in that, like, KD superstar in his mid-30s edition. But, they also, sort of addition by subtraction, get Brandon Ingram's like black hole touches out of the way, and replace him with the like best late clock ISO scorer you can find on the wing.
they might not be done. Like there are still potential moves for them. If they really want to go all in on right now, they're like, I don't think LeBron's going to Toronto, but like Kyrie doesn't seem to fit in with the current time frame that Dallas has in mind. So this current look in Toronto might not even be the most dangerous version of them we see like heading into the 2027 playoffs. I can't believe it's going to be 2027 the next time we get playoff games. But yeah, it's amazing. Grady Dick's out. You and I were right about him. He was, we didn't like him very much in the draft. It hasn't worked out. Maybe he'll be a second team guy. But you mentioned Jacoby Walter, who made a lot of threes last year and is a viable bench wing. And there are just a lot of guys on the Toronto roster now who feel like they slot into their proper role, as opposed to last year when they were just stretched thin in terms of usage.
Yeah. I think they need their version of Champagny basically as their just high volume 3-point shooter in the starting lineup. But aside from that, they're going to be big, physical, switchable, versatile, and just a real pain to play against. So for the Knicks' sake, I hope that doesn't happen until late in the playoffs. All right. For me, the second most impactful move this offseason in terms of the title picture is the Thunder keeping Isaiah Hartenstein. I think that retention, which it was a little unclear of if they were going to have to move off of him because of second apron concerns. And they drafted a big center from Michigan, a Daimara. So it was unclear of is this Hartenstein replacement? But the fact that they kept him, I felt like he was the one piece they couldn't afford to lose. And they had to trade out Isaiah Joe, Aaron Wiggins for a little bit of salary cap relief. I still think it's possible a Lou Dort trade could come. They picked up his team option, but if they want a little bit more flexibility, I could see that being another move they make because he was a little bit redundant with some of the other players they had last year, wasn't quite as effective as he'd been in the past. Hartenstein was the one piece that OKC could not afford to lose in the current picture of the Western Conference with San Antonio. And he was the one who they tasked with guarding Wemby most of that series with J-Dub out. And I just think with them keeping Hartenstein and the internal development they're going to get from guys like AJ Mitchell, Jalen Williams having a healthy year because last year was just a completely lost season for him, and some of the other young guys they have who is, again, easy to forget because of how dominant they've been the last few years, but super young team with recent lottery picks coming in. I love what they did in the draft this year. And I just think, they needed to keep Hartenstein in the building, and keeping him at a relatively team-friendly cost is going to allow them to continue being contenders. And I think entering the season as the favorites from that move alone.
Yeah, I think they might have even been the favorites if they had to find a way to replace Hartenstein. That's how good they still are and how well positioned they are to make a move and get a little better if they decide the time is now, because the Thunder are still a team that has a lot of prospects that other teams are going to like. There's going to be someone out there who's if Nikola Topic isn't getting a chance in OKC, we want to give him a chance. They can't pay Kyrie. So I'm not going to think about Kyrie with OKC. They don't want to add him to the pay sheet, but yeah, this team could still trade Lou Dort. They still, it's great that they have Lou Dort on a deal that there will be teams interested in if they start offering him around, which they definitely will be open to. But we have I was going to say Boris Dirk. We have a PodCham exclusive source telling us that Thomas Sorber is very much on the trade block right now with OKC. My first thought as a Sorber lover, their 15th pick from a year ago who tore his ACL before his rookie year, I thought he was going to be the guy most screwed by that Mara pick. I was either it's Sorber going out or they think Hartenstein's leaving. Well, Hartenstein gets re-signed, maybe takes a pay cut, but just based on how valuable he's been to them, especially in the regular season. And this team is as much in the mix as they've ever been going into a season. So that's, good times for our OKC fans, of which there are many.
We do have a lot of OKC fans in our audience. I hope that Sorber gets a chance to get to contribute on this team. I liked him as a prospect a lot more than I liked Adai Mara as a prospect. They're probably both going to be competing for minutes this year as that backup five with Jalen Williams as well. It's just super deep, super crowded team, but I want to see what Sorber looks like. I think he had a lot of similarities to Isaiah Hartenstein, so I saw them drafting him as like a potential down the line replacement. He's a good passer, good rebounder, good defensive anchor as a center. So I want to see what he looks like, and if they do trade him, I would be all over that as a front office in the NBA.
I just want to say, like, Isaiah Hartenstein has ostensibly shrunk a little bit in the playoffs the last couple years for OKC. I think that he is as valuable as any center in the league after like the very top tier of luxury bigs. And I think part of the problem is that sure, OKC like looks like a great 3-point shooting team, especially their title year if you just look at the numbers. But when it comes to the playoffs, they've been scared to play great shooters like Isaiah Joe and Wiggins. They've resorted back to low volume, streakier shooters like Lou Dort and Alex Caruso. And Isaiah Hartenstein, for all of his offensive gifts, is a non-shooting big. And they often want to play him with Chet, whose shot is on and off and rarely respected. So I just think we haven't seen the best version of playoff iHeart. And I didn't have this on my list. I wasn't thinking about it. But I totally agree with you that it's massive. And he is an incredibly valuable guy whose stats will never reflect his impact on winning.
Yeah, and to that point, I think if they, in the hypothetical where they had lost him, I would have had San Antonio as the favorite. I just think he's that important to that matchup. At least San Antonio is the West favorite. So I just think I want to see how all their young guys look, and he was, I think, really big in this playoff run for them to Game 7 of the Western Conference Finals. Got played off the floor a little bit more the year before, especially against Indiana. He just kind of wasn't as useful in that series, but just having him as a pitch is huge.
Where did you have Philadelphia?
We're getting there. So this is on the fringes of that. My third most impactful for the title picture is just everything that happened with Boston this summer.
Yeah,
so
they went from around plus 600 to around plus 1,300 to win the title.
Okay. So I am still riding high from the championship. But the one thing that could have brought me down was Boston trading Jaylen Brown for Giannis. And the fact that they didn't do that, and not only did not do that, but then traded Jaylen Brown for Paul George, is such a boon for the top of the Eastern Conference, because Boston overachieved last year. It became clear in the playoffs that, like, yes, they had some things that made them a great regular season team, better net rating than the Knicks and most of the teams in the East. But when it came down to it, they were missing interior presence and just didn't quite have the star level shot creation that they had in previous years, which getting Giannis would have definitely impacted that. But now with Jaylen Brown going out, and I do think that Boston is going to be a better team than they were last year. I think last year they probably weren't quite as good as their record, and also they were just more of a regular season team than a playoff team. I think they will be a better version of that same thing where, they didn't have Tatum for most of the year. So you take Jaylen Brown out and you put a healthy Jason Tatum in. I think that's a wash, at least, depending on how Tatum continues to recover from the Achilles, probably an upgrade. And then you take kind of injured Jason Tatum, which you had for a third of the season, and put in Paul George. That's an upgrade as well. And then Mitchell Robinson, which, also slight tear shed there, losing him, going in for their, whether it's Mitch or Keita who's starting for them, the one coming off the bench is going to be a massive upgrade over Garza and Vooch and sort of the bench bigs that they had last year, plus all the internal progression from their young guys, Ewa Gonzalez, Jordan Walsh, Baylor Shireman. I think they're going to be a better team than last year, but I think I was worried that they would be like a real deal contender with either healthy Tatum and Brown plus Mitch, or Tatum and Giannis. Now I still see them as like transition year. They're trying to figure out how to retool on the fly around Tatum. They're going to win a lot of games in the East, but I don't really see them as a threat in the playoffs.
Their center group is sneaky great now. I mean, obviously they add Mitch, who had the offensive rebound that sealed the championship. But like, again, sort of like we said with Toronto, Nimi Keita, decent starting center, maybe a little in over his head in the playoffs. He's also just going to need to see some more playoff games. It's a lot to ask of a guy whose role was so drastically ratcheted up. But yeah, I mean, they now have two awesome centers who do awesome center stuff like Pirtle. Mitchell Robinson was in the Knicks' best finals lineup. Like Brunson, Bridges, Anunoby, and Mitch, that group of four was plus 20 per 100 possessions in the finals. So Boston got a guy we've seen perform in, the final stages of the NBA season. And overall, like I still think this team is going to be very dangerous. They might even feel very free from the Jaylen Brown rain cloud because it's not fun to have a guy in the locker room whose favorite season in Boston was one of their most disappointing playoff outs. So clearly it reached just an untenable level of acrimony and they needed him out. I will say also, like, I owe an apology to the Clippers, who I think I shredded them on the podcast and a lot of other people did too, not on the podcast, when they let him go because they didn't want to give him another year or a no trade clause. I forget the specifics, but like they went and filled those roles with filled that money with a couple good role players. The Clippers, obviously had a very, said goodbye to a very depressing chapter of Kawhi and Paul George that just never materialized as like a healthy, real playoff run. But like the Clippers have a lot of good young players now. They didn't get stuck in that money. Kawhi deserved every dollar they gave him, even though he was hurt at various times. So it's a side Clippers note. I just feel like they've done a lot of things right. And I also wouldn't be surprised if this is another Celtics season where they overperform expectations. Peyton Pritchard takes another step. I don't think he's going to turn into Jalen Brunson, but I think he can become somewhere between what he's been and what Jalen Brunson is. I've said this for years now. I think Peyton Pritchard has like an all-star appearance on a not great team sort of ceiling, which is still a really good player. They're never going to ask him to be the guy. Derek White's still in his prime. Paul George is still good when he's healthy. Tatum should be great. So yeah, I mean, especially in the East, which it's not like the East is like taking a massive step up. We've just kind of shuffled guys around. Yeah. I think the Celtics will very much be in the mix, depending on the Tatum we get, because it was a little awkward when he came back trying to reintegrate him, and then he couldn't play for a second, and he's on load management. So, like, barring Jason Tatum, Achilles management, this team has a chance to be right back at the top.
Yeah, I'd expect them still to be a top 3 or 4 team in the regular season and then see what happens in the playoffs. But yeah, we'll get to the Philly side of it.
The last thing I want to actually, this is the Philly side of it.
Sure.
We can't say it's nothing that Jaylen Brown has been a minus player on the court for Boston for the majority of his career. And like, there are just no other players that we hold in such high regard. I mean, he won a finals MVP. He was amazing in that finals. And still, like, it means something. And I don't even know enough about the math of like his true shooting and his turnover rate. Like, I've seen all these numbers floating around. All I know is they've been worse with him on the court in a very, very large sample. And it means something. And yeah. If he doesn't want to be on the team and he thinks he's better than Tatum and just like sort of refuses to accept his role as a good sidekick, I understand letting him go. But he's also going to be very valuable for Philly. So how do you feel about the Philly side of things?
Yeah, so we can talk about the Philly side. I actually had Miami getting Giannis as a more impactful title move than Philly getting Jaylen Brown. But for Philly, I mean, part of it is it's really hard to wash the taste of how uncompetitive that Knicks series was out of my mouth. Like it was.
Oh yeah, it sounds like you're trying really hard.
It was. Yeah, I might have to go back and watch the highlights again. It was it was a very uncompetitive sweep. The only competitive game was the game that Joel Embiid missed. And when Embiid was on the court, and granted he was a little compromised, but I feel like at this point you just have to bake that in, that he's like that version of Embiid that we got in the playoffs is kind of the norm or even above par a little bit for what you would expect for Embiid in a playoff run. And they just looked so far away from a defensive perspective, especially. And when he's on the court, like they have some pretty glaring holes defensively. And it's just hard, even with Jaylen Brown, who gives them some more Embiid insurance. Like if Embiid misses a round of the playoffs, you know, they'll still have two high-level shot creators out there in Maxey and Brown. But, and no doubt their top four, when healthy, of Maxey, Brown, Embiid, and Edgecombe is elite talent-wise. But they have no depth. They have plenty of places to pick at defensively. Dean Wade is probably going to be their fifth starter, and he's a solid player, but we've seen with the Cavs time and time again that like teams can hide guys on him defensively. He's just such a low volume offensive player that, you know, it's hard to survive with him out there offensively when playoff time rolls around. And just their exit was so uncompetitive that I don't think swapping Jaylen Brown in for Paul George like massively changes the outcome for their team last year. I think it's a move you have to make to kind of set up the post Embiid timeline a little bit, where you can build around Maxey, Edgecombe, and Jaylen Brown, and that's like an exciting 1 through 3 in terms of athleticism and shot creation, two-way ability. But it requires so much going right for them to make a deep playoff run, between Embiid staying healthy, the blend of Maxey, Edgecombe, and Brown all working well together, which I don't think is a guarantee, VJ's offensive development. So I think it's a move you have to make. Like, it's a relatively low cost move, but especially to get off the Paul George contract. But I don't see it as like they're firmly in the top tier of contenders in the East.
There's this story that I saw swirling that they called LeBron immediately after the trade. And they have $6 million of mid-level exception left after Dean Wade. So apparently LeBron is willing to take a contract like that to have some fun in what might be his last year. If you were LeBron and you're just thinking about one season, is Philly your choice? And we're not just talking about your best chance to win a title. We're thinking about the politics. We're thinking about public image. Like, what would you do if you're in LeBron's shoes and you're thinking about legacy?
I mean, from a title perspective, the team that he puts over the top is San Antonio, but that's not really, it doesn't seem like that's on the board for him. That is, if I were him, where I would go for one season. You get to play with Wemby. They have enough guys that you can kind of, coast through the regular season and load manage. And then you fill a real need for them in the playoffs in terms of, game management, position that is currently filled by Tobias Harris, who I think is a solid pickup, but it was a position they needed last year at that 4. But of the East teams, Miami, Cleveland, Philly, I mean, Cleveland for narrative reasons makes sense, but him and James Harden on the same team together just kind of makes me cringe. I just don't see that.
I don't know how he can watch the last couple of years of the Cavs in the playoffs, injuries or not, and think I want to be a part of that. It's interesting. Who are you talking about the Spurs load managing? All their best players are really young. Does Wemby need to be
managing LeBron?
Oh, okay.
But to me, of the options, I think Miami's the most exciting for him, personally.
Interesting. Yeah. The Spurs would also be some really cool, like LeBron, Pop reunion. Obviously, Pop's like still a big part of things. Team USA Magic brought back together. I would definitely consider Philadelphia. It's hard for me to imagine Jaylen Brown being a compliant member of like the LeBron goodbye tour. And I will say, I've been a Jaylen Brown hater for a long time. After what he said in response to the story that he thinks he's the smartest guy in every room, I'm a Jaylen Brown fan. I'm in the sports world. It's a pretty low bar. I don't think that there was a better response in the ether for him to go with. So good on him for handling that one head on. I will be tuning into his streams moving forward. Philly's in the mix if LeBron wants to play in front of like good fans and have a decent chance to win.
Yeah. And that would no doubt be a really good team, and he fits a position of need for them. And that starting five, just from an on paper, like all-star level talent perspective, is, I'm sure they'd have some pretty amazing moments. I'm just also sure there would be a lot of games where like Embiid and LeBron aren't getting back on defense and they're playing 3-on-5. And the Jaylen Brown, LeBron push-pull would be really interesting to see, where Jaylen Brown might suddenly find himself being the third or fourth option on some nights on that team, which I'm sure is not what he expected.
How about Derek White, Paul George, LeBron, Jason Tatum, Mitchell Robinson?
I just think he hates Boston, but that would really upset me if LeBron ended his career in a Boston jersey.
All right. Keep it moving.
Let's talk about Miami, because I do think that would be an interesting LeBron team. But Miami getting Giannis, and it makes them a really strange team where they're sort of a different version of Toronto a little bit. Giannis, a very different different basketball player than Kawhi is. But again, an elite defensive starting group between Davion Mitchell, Giannis, Bam, and Andrew Wiggins. So a 3-4-5 that can switch. Davion can lock down on sort of smaller guards, but it's a weird team because they had to give up a lot of their depth to make this move between Jaquez, Hero, Ware. I worry about their depth and I worry about their shooting in a way that I don't with Toronto. And I feel like this team is a couple transaction cycles away from being like a real deal contender. Now I think they've elevated themselves from, the 10 seed they were last year to more of like a team that can really push for that top 6 and should probably be in that top 6, but I don't think they're like a 50+ win team.
Yeah,
but
Vegas agrees. Vegas has them as the 11th best odds overall.
Okay.
So probably somewhere in that top 4 or 5 in the East.
Yeah, it's just really hard to see how they get proper spacing with Bam and Giannis as the 4-5 and some of the just lack of shooting answers they have on the team. But I think they're going to force turnovers. They're going to get out in transition. I'm excited to see Spo once again with like a real top tier level talent in the league, who he hasn't had since, maybe Jimmy Butler on his night and in his playoff moments, but consistently over the course of a whole regular season, he hasn't had a player like this since LeBron. So I want to see what he unlocks with Giannis. I think Miami was always really good at taking away Giannis's strengths when he was in Milwaukee. So I'm very curious to see what Spo can do to kind of maximize Giannis's strengths now that he's actually on his team. And that interplay with Bam is going to be really interesting to see, like, does that work? They like to operate from a lot of the same areas on the court. Bam is kind of experimenting with becoming a stretch 5, but it's not like a nailed down skill for him yet. So I think they're going to be really interesting, but they're probably 3 or 4 rotation pieces away from being like a real deal title contender.
Miami's very much in the mix with Toronto for best defensive front court in the league now. Just rolling out Wiggins, Bam, and Giannis is going to be a real problem for offenses in the East. I think since Bam became the full-time starter, he's tied with Rudy Gobert for the most all-defensive selections. So you could argue just due to seniority, we should give them the nod over like Scotty Barnes and CMB, who is going to be special. I have to say, we haven't talked about the Giannis trade. No one wants to talk about Milwaukee right now. They probably should have made the deal earlier if they knew that Giannis's heart was truly out of there. Given where they were, I didn't hate it. And I like it less knowing that the 13th pick became Nate Ament. So I'm not a Nate Ament guy. I thought he should have been picked like around the 20 mark if I ran every team. But getting Harrow, who is better than I thought he was a couple of years ago, Kel'el Ware, who I was very skeptical of as a prospect, still skeptical that like he has the competitive makeup to reach anything close to his ceiling. We like Jaime. I really like Kasparis. You weren't a big Kasparis guy. But it feels better in Milwaukee than I thought it was going to. having Braden Burries, who they got at number 10, I thought that was a steal.
Like him a lot.
Jaime, who might scale up and become one of those like shocking Victor Oladipo on the Pacers, sort of where did that star come from? It wouldn't blow my mind. It's not a nightmare in Milwaukee like it felt like it could quickly become. If they had traded him for Jaylen, forget the Celtics side of it. I still wouldn't have liked it as much as this opportunity to swing on some guys who are young or in their prime and get some draft capital.
Yeah, Jaylen wouldn't have made sense for Milwaukee because then you're just a worse version of what you were before in terms of a middling team of supporting talent around a singular star who would not be as good as Giannis. So I agree. Like, I liked this more than whatever else was out there. They certainly should have moved him earlier, but it's a lot of picks. Like, maybe with the new flattened lottery odds, they'll get like lucky with something.
By the way, I'm not going to be picking Miami to make the finals, but I also really respect that they're just like, let's get Giannis and worry about the rest of it after. Sure. When Bam isn't scoring 83 points, he's not a sure thing shooter, but and there will be like sort of lineup limitations. Like it's not going to be really easy, like spacing things out for Giannis when you have both Bam and Davion on the floor, and Davion has to play minutes. He's valuable. But whatever, it's Giannis, that you'll figure it out. Role players will gravitate toward Miami now that they have Giannis in the back end of his prime. So not that Miami's side needed to be defended in that deal, but I'm interested to see like what the Giannis gravitational pull does for their roster over the course of the year.
Yeah, and they're another team that like needs that kind of Champagny type of just high volume 3-point shooter in the starting lineup. Any sort of guards that are on the market, I expect to hear Miami just like heavily linked to any disgruntled guard out there who's not making a prohibitive amount of money. So
yeah, I mean they might go and get Drew Holiday. I mean, it would bum me out if the Blazers let Drew Holiday go for not much because he was super valuable last year. He still might be very good. But there will be guys, and we're always surprised by the price for certain like vets who are older, who are getting paid a lot of money. Like there will just be ways that Pat Riley will work black magic and end up with like one more really good player. They did it with, was it Terry Rozier a few years ago? R.I.P. to Scary Terry. Like, like the Heat find those guys who are not franchise changers, but when you have a couple stars like the Heat do now, like, they'll definitely be in a lot of talks.
Yeah. So those ones are the ones that I think are like actually impactful in terms of singular moves. And then I have some other moves that I just wanted to hit on, which have an impact, but are not going to be, I think, swinging the title. So, and things I just either liked or didn't like. So one thing that I thought was great, and probably the next most impactful thing on my list, was the Knicks keeping the majority of the band together. Obviously they lost Mitchell Robinson. It's going to hurt. I was really worried they would only be able to keep one of Landry Shamet, Mitchell Robinson, Jose Alvarado, and Mo Diawara, who, for people who weren't super tapped into the middle of the Knicks regular season, is, athletic, big, or maybe not super athletic, but big wing who can really has potential to be able to shoot it and defend, and is kind of their only, or one of their few internal, like, young paths to real high level outcomes. So I thought they had to keep him. And I was worried that that Shamet was going to get a big deal from a team that could promise him like a 6th or 7th man role. Jose was going to get a bigger role somewhere else, and Mitch was going to get a bigger payday somewhere else that we couldn't afford. The fact that we only lost Mitch out of those four and got Shamet and Jose and Diawara on contracts that are really team-friendly bargains, and in Shamet's case, I think borderline robbery. Like we're paying him $24 million over the next 4 years. So $6 million a year. And the last two of them, he's guaranteed like $1 million a piece. Just like, I think Champagne's a better player, obviously, but Julian Champagny got, I think, $15 million a year compared to Landry Shamet getting 6.
Do you have any sense of whether this was Shamet wanting to stay in New York versus just a cruel market for players of his level? Because he played at like an $18 million a year level in the playoffs, and he was never going to get that money because he hadn't sustained it for a very long time in New York. But I was certain someone would give him double digits, even if only for a couple of years.
Yeah, I thought it was going to be like 12 million a year, not 6, or more. And yeah, I think some of it is the organization really did well by him over the last few years. One of sort of the more, it's a little bit of a under the radar story as far as the Knicks, putting this team together. But
yeah, it's so beautiful.
They signed
really great.
They signed Landry Shamet, and then he dislocates his shoulder. He rehabs in the G League. They have maneuvered to get him in the G League draft. And I think he just appreciated them sticking by him to that degree when they could have cut bait with him pretty easily.
Yeah. And he was on the outskirts of the league for a second. He didn't have many takers. They took a flyer on him and then they stayed with him. Okay. We can't spend too much time on the Knicks.
Yeah. But just like, benefits of being in New York City, like Landry Shamet is not getting a appearance on the Tommy Alter podcast with John Turturro playing in Utah. So I think,
yes, he is, because John Turturro is his secret father.
So yeah, I just the fact that they kept the whole team together, with the exception of Mitch, and they got Drummond, who's like a fine stopgap as a backup center. He's not Mitchell Robinson, and I expect they'll probably address that position at the trade deadline, and Drummond will just kind of get them there. But the fact they kept everyone else, Celtics got weaker, at least from what was expected. They match up really well with Philly. Cleveland is just kind of in this waiting for LeBron purgatory. And Toronto was who we mentioned, I think, is the only really scary team from a matchup perspective. And then we'll see with Indy coming back. And CJ McCollum is still alive. You never know. But I just think, things played out well for the Knicks this summer.
Mitch was the lone second apron victim. Last thing I'll say about the Knicks, 8 different champions in 8 years. It's the best churn the league has had in terms of parity since the late 70s.
Yeah.
Pretty cool. Good times. Cool. And obviously the Knicks are New York, but it's just like as a fan of a small market team, I like that everyone's wrong about the playoff bracket every year now. It's good.
Yeah. All right. Next one, which I don't think really is going to swing the title race all that much, but is splashy, was the Wolves getting LaMelo Ball, which we have not talked about on the pod yet. This happened a couple weeks ago. Essentially, this Wolves team is going to look like Julius Randle out, Naz Reid out, Dante DiVincenzo probably going to miss the whole season rehabbing from his torn Achilles. And then you put LaMelo Ball in and Josh Green to a lesser extent, which I don't see how this is a better team than last year with losing, Randall, who for all of his warts, I think is still a positive player. Naz Reid, who's been really big for them in the playoffs, and Dante, who was one of their best rotation players before he got hurt. You lose Mike, Mike Conley was kind of not really contributing that much anymore, but he's out as well. I feel like they're going to be less deep. They're going to have some incendiary nights where LaMelo and Edwards are hitting like 8 threes apiece and their offense looks really great, but they're kind of pivoting their identity from this overwhelming size and strength and athleticism advantage to a little bit more of a finesse identity. More pressure is going to be on Gobert to cover up defensively and Jaden McDaniels to kind of shoulder a lot of the burden defensively. And I think they're going to have their nights where they look like a really elite team, but overall it's hard for me to see this being a better team than they were last year.
They dumped Julius Randle. That was the hint that something loud was coming.
Yeah.
Naz Reid, unprotected first in 2033. That doesn't exist. That's not a real year. 3 swaps, 3 seconds. I'm not sure I would have had the balls to do this if I ran Minnesota, especially if I knew that Ja Morant was available for nothing. Mm-hmm. But also, it's like your team got more talented. Your ceiling went up. Ant is signed with Minnesota through 2029. It's very easy to imagine a world where as much as he seems to love playing in Minnesota, as great a centerpiece as he's been for them, he sort of feels like they've hit a wall and there's no getting to the finals in this West, with the constraints of the Gobert contract and other places they've spent their money. You mentioned DiVincenzo. He didn't just, get injured for the playoffs. Like, he's probably missing this entire season because he got the worst injury in basketball, torn Achilles. LaMelo is making 46 this year, I think. They have him through, 2029, same as Ant. He's making, 41 this year, 44 next year, and 46 in the third year they'll have him if he's still on the team. LaMelo, talent-wise, is a $50+ million player in the 2026 NBA economy. But and I've gotten myself into trouble in the past, like getting too stubborn about guys I just don't buy into as people. And like, there were still a lot of LaMelo moments last year. I'd turn on this like really exciting Hornets team and feel like he's just a thorn in the growth of the beautiful thing they have coming up with Knipple and Brandon Miller and a lot of good role players around them. I'm scared for both teams, but I think you just like, you had a really scary potential near future where Ant gets disgruntled or feels like the ceiling's been reached in Minnesota.
Yeah.
And now you've drastically lowered the floor, in my opinion, but also increased the ceiling, which, as a team that's competing for the conference finals every year, like, moving your ceiling up 1 or 2%, getting LaMelo Ball, like, it makes a lot of sense. He's 6'8", elite passer, great shooter, takes awful shots, but maybe won't with Ant because Ant's been known to sort of reel in eccentric, wild personalities. They made it work with Julius Randle. They made it work with Cat, but maybe not. Now that we saw how good Cat could be in New York, I can't hate it. They gave up a decent amount. LaMelo gets paid a lot, but again, not as much as his talent could easily dictate if he just had kind of a better head on his shoulders in the first handful of years in his NBA career. They gave him the max, actually. He just couldn't get like the super max because of probably like all NBA incentive.
Yeah. And like, to be clear, LaMelo with the Hornets last year, they were almost 8 points better per 100 possessions with him on the court compared to off. So he, doesn't have the same kind of negative analytics profile of a Jaylen Brown. Like LaMelo, the analytics are pretty favorable towards him in terms of his 3-point rate, his rebounding, and just his playmaking and his overall sort of on-court, off-court differential. I think this was a move that could kind of get them back to the level they were at this year. With it was becoming clear they were going to take a step back between DiVincenzo being out, some of their older players kind of declining a bit, and then dumping Julius Randle. Like, there were some pretty clear holes in this team. His addition, at least, I think, raises their ceiling closer to what it was last year. But it seems to me like a bit of a, like, this isn't going to get them closer, in my opinion, to the Thunder or the Spurs. And I think they probably now match up worse with the Nuggets than they did previously, having those other big bodies on the roster.
Yeah. And Naz Reid was also a fan favorite, fun player, but it's Naz Reid, he's not a star. LaMelo is a legitimate star ceiling. There is definitely a world where the offensive fit is amazing. Ant, for all of his talents, is not a point guard. LaMelo wants the ball in his hands at all times, which it's good and bad. But like, I can see a universe where LaMelo and Ant make all NBA teams this year. It's an awesome fit. It sort of, despite all the pain in Cleveland, like, looks a little bit like when they went and aggregated some assets to go and get Donovan Mitchell. I really liked that trade at the time for Cleveland. I still do, because we'd seen a couple massive playoff moments from Donovan Mitchell, and I felt like he was a legitimate winning player. I'm not sure that LaMelo is a legitimate winning player, even with the plus minus stuff. because we've never seen him in the playoffs.
Yeah.
But I refuse to hate it because the very small chance that Minnesota wins the title just went up, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah, I do look forward to seeing more Ant off the ball. I think he's never really played with a high level playmaker next to him. And recently he's had to kind of shoulder more of the playmaking responsibility himself. So I am excited to see what he looks like as more of like an assassin scorer, play finisher, and having to do less of like running pick and roll and trying to be a point guard. Basically having LaMelo in that capacity, I think, is going to be good for Ant's offensive game. But yeah, it's just, they lost a lot of size and a lot of talent, and they did, I think, the best that they could do to recoup that talent with LaMelo. But it's
a massive red flag that after like the most positive year the Hornets have had in a long time, they were ready to get him out of there. Like, yeah. Because it seems like with Charles Lee and just the general direction and energy in Charlotte, like they have smart people making decisions now, and they were like, we just don't believe in this person, because again, the LaMelo stats are always really, really good. Minnesota's betting a little bit on a young French big man you and I both love, Joan Béranger. Because like you said, they're giving up a lot of size here. They're not going to be able to find like an awesome backup center. Maybe Béranger is ready to step into a rotation role. I'm really bummed that DiVincenzo won't get a chance on this team, because a closing five of LaMelo, Dante, Ant, McDaniels, and Gobert could like legitimately compete with anyone. Yeah. Maybe the Ayo Dosunmu playoff stuff is real. I've always liked him. Maybe Terrence Shannon takes a step. But this team has gradually been hemorrhaging depth due to injuries and, trading more guys for fewer guys. Actually, except with the Cat trade, but Dante's injured now. Yeah. And Randall's gone. Yeah, I'm just really interested to see the chemistry between those two. LaMelo and Ant in transition is going to be really, really fun.
Yes. Yeah, they're going to be a fun team to watch for sure. But they're not cracking that top tier of the West for me.
LeBron, Minnesota, LeBron,
be a fun one.
Again, like I said, like they're kind of missing one awesome guy for their playoff closing five. They can use some shooting. Terrence Shannon, not a great shooter. Isaiah Evans, rookie, probably won't be ready. Jaylen Clark, I'm not really in on him. We're talking about LeBron as like, a shooter and nothing else. It's LeBron James. He's going to be great as long as he plays basketball. It's an interesting fit. It's hard for me to imagine LeBron in Minnesota, but player-wise, I don't know.
He's just a way better version of what Julius Randle was for them last year, which be pretty good. No, I think if it's purely odds of winning the championship, the teams for him are San Antonio or Minnesota. But it seems like those teams aren't on his list. From what I was seeing, it's between just Charlotte, Philly, and Miami. And
if they got him and AD, you don't think Golden State is in the mix?
If they got both, then sure. But it seems like AD's not getting traded there for some reason. And even so, like there's a lot of ifs with that team.
All right. Have we gotten to Portland yet? Portland went from 90-1 to 80-1. That's how it was a hell of a deal.
Yeah, actually, yeah. I didn't even have John Moran on my list, but talk about.
Yeah, I mean, I don't blame you. It's really simple. Like, what is there I can say about John Moran that hasn't been said? It might be a complete flop. His 3-point shooting has gotten worse every year of his career, basically. And yet, another trade I refuse to hate, because Jeremy Grant was essentially, in the grand scheme of things, if that's even the expression, Jeremy Grant was not a valuable contract to the Blazers. We made that man so rich. I think it was like 165. Chris Murray might be a long-term rotation guy in the league, but I'd be shocked if we look back and wish we didn't include Chris Murray in the deal. And so we basically got John Morant for nothing, and he doesn't fit with our roster. It's bad news for Scoot. It's a reminder that we're not building around Damian Lillard at this stage of his career post-injury. But, the Blazers, like Toronto, have had a lot of good NBA players, and they've just been on the hunt for a superstar caliber talent who is willing to stay in their market. And I think, there have been some very positive Blazers stories among like the few beat writers I follow, that Micah Nori had a great meeting with Ja, and they talked about, turning over a new leaf in his career. I went on a Grizzlies pod a few days ago. Shout out $2. Shout out Drew. Shout out Dusty. And I said, like, I just hope that Ja is open to the idea of a positive future in the NBA, because his energy was so bad at the end of his stint in Memphis. Yeah. And it was such a tumultuous couple of years. And he quit on that team, and he said things that belonged in the locker room, to Mike's after games. So it might be a really bad flame out. But we have a couple of years to figure out if we can revamp Ja Morant. And we've seen him, like, if Ja Morant didn't get hurt in the 22 playoffs before, like, he almost knocked out the Warriors team that went on to win the title. And he was unstoppable getting to like a couple feet in front of the free throw line and throwing a floater up over 7-footers or over Draymond. He is special. We all know that, when he's healthy, when his head's right. And the fact that we got him for essentially nothing, for me, makes it a no-brainer deal, even if, he can't get back to who he was just because of, the way things have gone for him, not just in terms of PR, but also play, because it's really hard to be a guy his size and shoot, sub 33% from three. Last year it was in the 20s. There are no starting guards in the NBA his size that, aren't okay 3-point shooters. So on the most basic level, he'll have to figure that out. And the Blazers have been good at getting non-shooters to figure out their outside shot in recent years. Like Cliggin's starting to shoot. Tumani was a complete non-shooter. He makes threes now. Scoot was a bit of a shooting project. Like 3-point shooting is like the last worry on Scoot's list right now. Yeah. So I choose to be positive. And maybe Ja Morant can be our version of like a Jalen Brunson light. You surround him with athletes, you put the ball in his hands in high leverage moments, and you trust him to score, create advantages for you on offense. Again, it's nuts that in 2026 we are saying maybe Ja Morant can be Jalen Brunson light, but times have changed.
Do you think Dame's going to come off the bench? Do you think they're going to start both of them?
They've said they're going to start Dame.
Okay.
So look, they're like, yeah, I don't think this team is competing for a conference finals in 2027. I'm very realistic about this. Our defense, the backcourt defense, is going to be rough. There's just no way around that. But it will be good TV. I think it'll be good TV. We have athletes. We have Clingan at the rim. We still have Rob Williams at the rim. We have Tumani, who's an awesome wing defender. We have Denny, who's a good wing defender when he's locked in and not exhausted. So, and Drew Holiday's still on the roster. Like there are ways to stagger them, even if they're going to start together, and mitigate the, defensive hole that you'll inevitably have with them on the court together. And it's, terrifyingly similar to the problems we used to have with Dame and CJ. Yeah. But also the Blazers are not delusional. They know they're not competing for a title this year. It's just another really talented guy who we can spin the wheel on, and at the very least, like, rehab his trade value. And if it doesn't work out, if Scoot takes a step, if he doesn't fit with the roster long term, maybe we swap him for more than we got him for.
Yeah. I think you can't hate it because you literally gave up nothing. But yeah, it's going to be interesting to see, like, if that means both Scoot and Drew are coming off the bench. Like, those are two guys who I was going to be really interested to see what they looked like this year. So them being kind of crowded out for minutes is like maybe a little suboptimal, but Scoot also hasn't yet proven that, he shouldn't be scrapping for minutes at this point in his NBA career. Dame, Ja, Denny, Tumani Kamara and Donovan Clingan. Like, that's an interesting five.
Yeah. I mean, there's one number that really matters if you want to be negative about John. He's played 79 games in 3 seasons. You know,
Yeah.
some of it's been injury, some of it's been mystery, chemistry stuff, off-court issues, obviously. But if you want to be really positive about Ja, you say he went to Murray State. He wasn't one of these guys who was like media trained from 14 on in the AAU circuit. He was like the 4th best player on Zion's AAU team. He wasn't supposed to do any of the things he's done in the NBA. And maybe like the attention, the power, the money that came with his like rapid ascent from Murray State into Memphis's ecosystem, like really rattled him, and he got away from who he is, because I thought of him as like a really joyous, awesome competitor in his early years in the league. And maybe this is, you know, like he just needed to go somewhere else to sort of refresh his soul and find joy playing basketball again. That's what I'm going to try to believe. And I just, it's also insane looking back, like my first moment. I mean, I love John the draft. I had him number 1 in his class. I thought he was going to be a superstar, but then like, I think it was his rookie year in the bubble play-in game against the Blazers when we had Carmelo. That was Portland Carmelo year.
Greatest 8 seed of all time.
He and Jaren were so impressive as youngsters in that play-in game that we won. The last thing I ever expected was for Ja's teammate-ness, competitiveness to be questioned to the degree that it has been. The way things unraveled in Memphis, they're going to be fine now with Cam Boozer, Edey, Cedric Howard. There are a lot of good things now happening in Memphis. Shout out Richie Saunders. But just the way things, you know, fell apart is wild to me in retrospect. And he's still an all NBA level talent. His numbers were terrible last year in limited games, but he also had a lot of nights where he looked like vintage Ja. So, you know, I hope refs and fans will give him a chance to figure it out, because Portland will absolutely love this guy if he's anything close to what he was during the good times in Memphis.
Yeah. All right. Last one real quick. Want to just real quick hit on what the Lakers did, because they did a lot. And I'm not sure how impactful those moves are going to be, but they traded basically all of their future assets for Walker Kessler. They signed Quentin Grimes to a 4-year, $60 million deal. Speaking of Landry Shamet getting $24 million and other players getting far more than that, Quentin Grimes getting 15 a year is a lot, in my opinion. They signed Colin Sexton. They signed Sandro Mamu Kelashvili.
Mamu,
right? Do those moves move the needle for you in terms of this team being a top 4 team in the West again?
It feels like Kessler, a lot of the money they were willing to throw at Kessler was just an ode to what Luka can do with a player of that archetype. Kessler's awesome. And I guess he hasn't had any of the like lower body injuries that would really scare me with a guy of his size.
Mm-hmm.
I love the fit with Luka. It's getting a little bit creepy how white this Lakers team is.
Yeah.
But they still have Luka. For 130, maybe that's what guys of Kessler's value get now. It's always hard to do like the reframe as the numbers keep going up. A lot of people seem to think that Utah fleeced LA. I think those tend to be people who never watched Walker Kessler at his best in Utah. Like it might be an overpay, but he deserves to make $100+ million on a 4-year deal in the NBA. He is that good. Mm-hmm. One of the best rim protectors on planet Earth. Will protect Luka defensively, catch lobs, rebound, do all the things that you wish DeAndre Ayton could have done for them last year.
Yeah.
So I don't know. Does it move the needle? TBD. LeBron was awesome for them this year. You know, like LeBron out for the Lakers is a real thing.
And Rui.
But we've also seen Luka operate at such a high level efficiently with a bunch of non-stars around him. That was like his best run in Dallas was, a team that had less star power than Walker Kessler, Reeves, and the guys, and like even Grimes. Grimes would have been amazing on those Dallas teams where Luka just needed like Reggie Bullocks and Dorian Finney-Smith. So however you feel about the Grimes deal, like he's another great fit with Luka. Mamu's good. I like Mamu. I don't know.
I don't know if I like him as a starting 4 is my thing.
And that's fair. But he could elevate. It wouldn't be shocking. He could be like Rui last year. I think Mamu has that talent in him. It just feels like it moves the needle enough that they could be really, really good if Luka's literally MVP. But Luka has to literally be MVP, like top 2 or 3 in voting, which he was close to last year, to put the Lakers in the real title picture. Again, every year we've had 8 straight different champions. So when you have Luka and you have Walker Kessler and you have Reeves, we can't write you off. You're as good as a couple of the teams that have really surprised us in recent years, or at least as talented. But, they won't be one of the first few teams that I mentioned in the Western picture heading into the year.
Yeah. And to echo everything on Kessler, ideal center fit with Luka, great rim protection, great lob threat. And I do think Utah losing him makes them a less interesting team this year. I still think they're going to be good, with Jaren Jackson, Lauri Markkanen. Darren Peterson has looked really good in 2 summer league games, and I think he was my favorite player in this draft. I think he's going to be amazing. But yeah, without Kessler, I think they have some real defensive concerns in Utah with the rest of that starting group. Keontae George, bad defender. Peterson's a rookie. Jaren Jackson can only cover up for so much, and Lauri Markkanen's not a great defender either. So Kessler was kind of the anchor who was going to tie that all together. But, the trade value combined with the amount on the contract is too good for Utah to pass up, so I get that. But yeah, with the Lakers, I have some depth concerns with them. Their perimeter D, I think, is going to be suspect, and they need Grimes essentially to be like their lockdown stopper for positions 1 to 3. And I think that's kind of stretching him a little bit based on what he's capable of. So I think they need, kind of what they got from Marcus Smart and Rui last year. Like they still kind of need those kinds of players on their team.
Yeah. And those were both like surprise outcomes.
Yeah.
I couldn't believe how valuable Marcus Smart legitimately was last year. Yeah, it feels like we finally have like the sort of fully Luka operation that we were used to his early years in Dallas. Like Austin Reeves is a very rich man's version of Dinwiddie when Dinwiddie was kind of at his peak in Dallas.
Yeah.
His peak was in Brooklyn, but his Dallas peak.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, it's probably not a title team, but they're giving Luka a chance to have the best Luka season ever and make them bona fide contenders.
Yeah. Okay. Real quick.
Oh, and also, sorry, you mentioned Cam Carr. We will not be wrong about another Lakers shooter. Cam Carr is going to be who we thought Dalton Connect would be.
Yes.
Cam Carr is a guy. Similarly, he's a better athlete. He's more explosive than Dalton Connect, but similar archetype. He's looked amazing in Summer League. Whenever we love a guy in the draft and then he's great in Summer League, we have to assume that we were completely right.
Yeah.
I hope he's ready because this team has like a land of opportunity now, especially after like the top 4 or 5 guys. And Cam Carr could easily end up like blowing his rookie expectations out of the water.
Yeah. Him, Adou, if he takes a step in his second year as like an athletic wing, Derek Jones potential type. There's a lot of opportunity for wings on this team. So
good LeBron team.
Good LeBron team if he wants the minimum. All right, real quick. Were there any like under the radar signings or moves from this summer that you thought like could move the needle in a real way?
In a real way, kind of killed some of the names I had in mind, but people that are good that I feel like were really positive signings for the team they're going to. Julian Champagny, 15 a year. Again, he's making the same amount per year as Quentin Grimes. After what he just did in the playoffs, That to me is a massive win for San Antonio. Not to mention, like, he's integrated into their system. They love him. He seems like a great dude. He says all the right things. Absolute dog, defends, rebounds on top of being an all-world catch and shoot guy.
Love it.
Luke Kennard to Phoenix. I don't know. Like, he scaled up a little bit for the Lakers, showed he can put the ball on the deck still, like he did in high school and at Duke. Tim Hardaway Jr. to Miami. You know, Miami needs, like we were talking about, they need to scrape together some buckets. They need shooting desperately. Tim Hardaway Jr. has been a great shooter his entire career. Marcus Smart, you just said his name, like, to Houston. I don't think Houston, I just refuse to believe in them after they sort of hurt me last year. But I think, weirdly, Houston needs some toughness. I never thought I'd say that. I thought toughness was like their main attribute. It's why I liked them going into last year. But teams get tougher when Marcus Smart shows up. He's sort of like guard, little curmudgeon, Dylan Brooks. So I didn't mind it. 2 years for 13 mil after what he showed last year. Udoka loves him from the Boston days. Maybe he's like their unsung captain for that team. Maybe he and KD end up trying to kill each other. We'll see.
I think Houston could fly under the radar a little bit this year because, especially, I assume Steven Adams is coming back at some point this year. Fred VanVleet will be back. Like, those are two starter level guys that they just didn't have last year and still won 50 games.
Sneakily, if Golden State ends up with LeBron and puts together like a Team USA team, getting DeAnthony Melton for a couple of years, only 11 mil. Like, I just love Melton. He's great. Every coach he's ever played for raves about him. He's like very poor man's Drew Holiday in all the best ways.
Great when he plays.
Santi Aldama to Dallas. I absolutely love that one, especially if Derek Lively is indeed their center of the future. And like, you just need like different looks and front court shooting wherever you can get it. We've been massive fans of Santi for a couple of years now. He can scale up in moments and like take on real usage and go on a heater and hit a couple threes and put the ball on the deck and defend his position at an okay level. Getting a 7-foot spacer with real scoring chops for Dallas as they like sort of balance not blowing their load too soon, but also trying to be good because Cooper Flag is already that good, and maybe they keep Kyrie, and Morez Johnson isn't a pick you make unless you want to be competitive soon and build a real culture. I just love Santi sort of speeding up the timeline and also like just releasing some pressure offensively.
Yeah, love all those. The two I had written down were, I mentioned the Spurs signing Tobias Harris. I think that could actually be a solid move for them. It's just a player type they didn't have last year where they were all like 6'5" guys or 6'6" guys, and then they're bigs, and Wemby and Cornette, they didn't really have that sort of bigger bodied, 6'9" forward. And, Harris is a spotty playoff history, but he's just a solid player. It's a body type they didn't have. Everyone raves about him as a locker room leadership guy. So I think that's just a good addition for them as they go into playoff battles this year. And then Isaiah Joe to Detroit, I think was a good move for them. And just getting a high volume shooter in there, crowded rotation in OKC where he didn't see the floor as much as maybe he should have, but just a really dynamic 3-point shooting threat that's a little bit more versatile offensively than like Duncan Robinson and Kevin Huerter, who they have in there already.
Yeah. It also feels like the Thunder are so talented. Yeah, that some of these guys around the edges the last couple of years have just been relegated to roles that they're overqualified for. It'll be really interesting to see what Isaiah Joe can be in Detroit, because we see time and time again, like they just need points. They need people to take just a little bit of the load off of Cade's shoulders. And, Danis, Jenkins, like you can't plan your future around him as fun as he was last year. I'm excited. I'm excited for Detroit. I want to see what their next act is. Yeah.
All right. Really quick, if you have a moment, favorite draft picks, which I didn't prep you for, but we have not potted since our draft live show. I can go first if you need to like pull up the list to refresh yourself.
I wasn't ready, but I'm ready.
Okay. Do you want to go first?
Love Mikal Brown.
Same.
We
Brooklyn.
we both had him top 5. We were like, I remember that feeling of dismay when I saw Reed Shepherd next to NBA athletes and he looked a little smaller than I expected. I felt really good so far watching Mikal Brown with NBA athletes at Summer League. Like, he's 6'5". He's not exactly the small guard that I think a lot of people consider him to be. He's got a little more size than that. He's more like Halliburton length, and he's a little bit thicker. He might fill out. He had a bad back at Louisville a lot of his freshman year, and he's starting to move more explosively like he did in spurts in college and always in high school when he was considered right out there with like the best prospects in his class. So I'm excited for Brooklyn. I think they really might have like a potential all-star guard in Brown.
Yeah.
Braden Burries, getting him at 10. I had him top 6. I think
Same.
Milwaukee did really well there before they went and took Nate Ament at 13.
Yeah.
I really like Yaxel at 11 for Golden State, kind of no matter what direction Golden State goes, because Yaxel is one of these very rare, really old college guys who's probably ready to contribute right away, but also might have a sneaky ceiling because he's got like insane measurables. He's athletic. He's versatile. And also like didn't play high school basketball. So he's kind of like a Siakam. He's sort of like one of these guys who took on basketball very late and has rapidly like evolved his game. I have other names, but do you want to drop a few?
Yeah. So obviously at the top, I think Utah and Memphis getting Darren Peterson and Cam Boozer.
Yeah.
Those are franchise changing level talents, even not having the number 1 overall pick. And they were the top 2 guys on my board. So those and Caleb Wilson going forward to Chicago.
Same, but in different order. I had Darren 1. I had Cam 3. I still loved it for the Grizzlies. I just kind of bitched out at the end and ended up with Cam at 3, AJ at 2.
Yeah. And then ones you didn't mention, I like the Mavs getting Morez Johnson. He's someone we've talked a lot about, and we thought he would be kind of a guy who would get, fall into the teens and be a steal there. But a lot of draft evaluators in sort of the draft consensus community coalesced around that take, and he ended up going in the top 10. But I think him next to Cooper Flagg is a really fun, switchable forward duo for years to come. And then there's just a bunch of guards that I liked who, because of how many talented scoring and skill guards there were in this class, some of them were bound to fall, and teams were able to scoop them up kind of later in the first round. So OKC getting Bennett Sturtz. Sturtz was, honestly, when I watched him, it reminded me a lot of watching AJ Mitchell at Santa Barbara. They're a little bit different in the way that they play, but just both so skilled, just super advanced skill level, being able to score from all 3 levels, pass, dribble. And I just think he's going to be a really good player. He's an older prospect, but I always like when OKC takes one of the guys that I like. I feel like it's a good sign. And the Lakers usually take the other guy who I like, which doesn't always end up as working out as well. But Sturtz, I like the Pistons getting Ibuka Okori from Stanford. I think he can be kind of a better version of Dennis Jenkins for them short term, with long-term potential to be way better. I had him as a lottery guy. I think I had both Okori and Sturtz in my top 10, and above more heralded guards like Acuff and Flemings. And then Philly getting LeBaron Philon at 22. I felt he was skill-wise on the level of those other guards at the top, and someone was bound to get squeezed. It ended up being him, falling to 22, and I just think that's a great value pick there. At
the end of the day, I guess like having Darren 1 and seeing him go 2, like that's probably like the biggest swing in value, just because of how consequential those picks at the top are, like with my board. But in terms of just falling compared to where I had guys, I mentioned Burries and Yaxel. Hannes Steinbach, I was really high on. I like him for Charlotte. Swain for Chicago, also Sturtz. Philon, I thought I ended up too low on, and then he got picked 22nd, so it turned out I'm pretty high on Philon. Cam Carr, we've talked about. And then the last guy, Josh Jefferson. I had around 20. He ends up going 28 to Brooklyn. So I loved the night for Brooklyn. And now I have to run because time flew and I have to be somewhere.
All right. It's been the PodChamp Pod. We will be back soon. Peace.